Okay girls, as requested, you have asked for a tutorial on how to do these stitches, so I'm going to start with the blanket stitch. Really, it's super easy as long as you have these two lines drawn on. You want two parallel lines and ask for about 5 inches of stitches. And where you start is very important for this stitch. So I always start on the bottom because then I can go towards the right. If you start on the top, you want to start on the right hand side because it's going to take you to the left. So I have already threaded my needle and I have knotted it. So I'm going to start on the bottom of my fabric of that line. I'm not starting at the end, that's okay. I'm going to pull my thread all the way through. Then what you need to do is not go straight up like you think you would for the blanket stitch, but take your thread and go diagonally across. And then sink your needle into that spot where it goes diagonally across. It's kind of important for you to have about the same angle on that diagonal for each stitch because that'll give you the same size blanket stitch each time. So I'm going to pull my thread through, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through so that it's tight because I want this loop. Because that loop is what's going to create the L shape of that blanket stitch. Next thing I need to do is take my needle and bring it up right below where I just sunk my needle. So this spot right here, I need to bring it up right below on the lower line. So you'll see my needle come up through. Right there. But I need to make sure that this loop here is around the outside of my needle. If it's over here, then it's not going to do anything. It's not going to keep that thread there. So you want to make sure it's on the outside. Pull your needle through, and there you've got that L shape of the blanket stitch. Now to do your next stitch, again, you're just going to pull your thread across, sink your needle, and pull your needle through. Again, saving enough thread for that loop. You want that loop every time. Then you'll bring your needle down. Make sure that you bring it up through, right below your other thread. And then you pull your thread until you've got that nice L shape. Let me show you what happens if you don't bring your needle up through and leave that loop around the needle. So I went diagonally across, sunk my needle, pulled my thread through, and left my loop. Now if you bring your needle up in the correct spot, but you don't wrap your loop, this is what's going to happen, and this is what it'll look like. It'll look like a diagonal line, that you just stitched a diagonal line. That's okay. You can pull on your loop, take your needle, go through that loop, and pull on it until you get that L back. So it's an easy fix. Now when you're done with these stitches, instead of going diagonally up and leaving it there, because you'll have this weird diagonal line, you need to take your needle and your thread and end it right next to where your needle had just come up. That'll secure that L blanket stitch, and it hides the fact that there's even a stitch there that holds it together. So when you're absolutely done, you need to turn your work over, and you can see that there are 3 lines here. I'm just going to pass my needle through underneath one of these lines. Those are the lines created by your stitches. And I leave a loop. That loop I'm going to go through with my needle. Some of you will remember this from the silk painting. Leaving a loop. I'm going to go through that loop. Leave a new loop. and go through that loop and pull until I get a knot. Now you don't want to pull too hard on these back stitches because it'll ruin your work in the front. Cut your thread so that your knot will not unravel. And there you got it. Blanket stitch. Super easy.